First tonight, he knew. New reporting from the New York Times shows that President Trump knew about the whistleblower complaint weeks before news of the complaint was made public. Quote, Trump had already been briefed on a whistleblower's complaint about his dealings with Ukraine when he unfroze military aid for the country in September, according to two people familiar with the matter. Lawyers from the White House counsel's office told Mr. Trump in late August about the complaint, explaining that they were trying to determine whether they were legally required to give it to Congress. According to the Times, it is unclear how much detail the lawyers provided Trump about the complaint, but this does mean that the president knew that the whistleblower had accused him of wrongdoing before he told EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland there was no quid pro quo, and before he ordered the Ukraine aid to be released. As the impeachment investigation moves forward, something we'll get to in a moment, and the walls continue to close in on the president, it seems that no one, not even one of his closest allies, is immune from getting thrown under the bus. Here's Trump in an interview with Bill O'Reilly talking about Rudy Giuliani.
What was Rudy Giuliani doing in Ukraine on your behalf?
Well, you have to ask that to Rudy, but Rudy, I don't even know. I know he was going to go to Ukraine, and I think he canceled the trip. But you know, Rudy has other clients other than me. I'm one.
So you didn't direct him to go there on your behalf. You
no.
didn't.
Rudy has other clients. Buckle up, Rudy Giuliani. Let's get this straight. Despite hours of interviews and dozens of questions on Ukraine over the last couple of months, including an hour on Fox just the other day, the president has never said that before. And this whole bus meet Rudy thing is coming just days after Giuliani, once again, made this strange remark about what would happen if he was ever thrown under the bus.
You can assume that I talk to him early and often.
Yeah.
And have a very, very good relationship with him. And all of these comments, which are totally insulting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen things written like, he's going to throw me under the bus.
Right.
When they say that, I say, he isn't, but I have insurance.
I have insurance. Stay tuned for what Rudy says in response to Trump's latest comments. And lest we forget, all of this is happening while we are now one big step closer to seeing possible articles of impeachment drawn up against the president. Today, the House Judiciary Committee scheduled its first impeachment hearing for December 4th. The title of the hearing, The Impeachment Inquiry into President Donald J. Trump, Constitutional Grounds for Presidential Impeachment. A Democratic aide tells NBC News that the witnesses for this first hearing will be academics like constitutional scholars and impeachment experts. Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler sent a letter to Trump asking whether he or his counsel plan to attend the hearing and question witnesses. Chairman Nadler reminded the president that House rules do empower him as chairman to curtail that involvement if, quote, you continue to refuse to make witnesses and documents available related to the impeachment investigation. In his letter to the president, Chairman Nadler writes, I remind you that the participation of the president or his counsel has been described by the committee in past inquiries as not a right, but a privilege or courtesy, which is being extended to the president's counsel. I am hopeful that you and your counsel will opt to participate in the committee's hearing, consistent with the rules of decorum and with the solemn nature of the work before us. This hearing will likely take place just as the House Intelligence Committee sends its written report summarizing the findings of its investigation into President Trump's efforts to enlist Ukraine in discrediting his political rival. The Judiciary Committee is expected to use that report to draft articles of impeachment in the coming weeks. I spoke earlier with Congressman Madeleine Dean, a member of the Judiciary Committee, about what she will be looking for as this process unfolds.
I believe I have to be as thoughtful as possible. That's why I want to see the report. I want to read and digest the report and see where it leads us, because what we have to combine is the evidence. It may be one article, it could be 3 articles, it could be 4, but the evidence, and then the judiciary matches that to the law, and then I overlay that with my oath of office. I swore on January the 3rd that I would uphold the Constitution of the United States. So I want to see all of the evidence, not prejudge articles of impeachment, marry it to the Constitution as well as my own oath.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Jill Wine-Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor and an MSNBC legal analyst. Neera Tanden, former senior advisor to President Obama and Hillary Clinton. She is president and CEO of the Center for American Progress. And Bill Kristol, editor-at-large of the Bulwark and the director of Defending Democracy Together. He served in senior positions in the Reagan and H.W. Bush administrations. Everyone, welcome. It's hard to know where to begin with the onslaught of news that we're getting in just the past few hours, but I think the biggest headline, Jill, is that the president knew about the whistleblower complaint in late August. That means he knew about it before he spoke to Gordon Sondland, the EU ambassador, saying there was no quid pro quo. He knew about it before he released the aid. If you were a prosecutor working on impeachment, if you were a lawmaker or a White House House counsel working on impeachment, what would you be asking?
I would have already assumed that what you've said was true to begin with. There was no other reason for the release of the money except that they got caught red-handed. And so I'd be asking for all the details from the OMB about the withholding of the release of it. I'd also be trying to let the American people know about the Budget Act that made it illegal to withhold money that had been appropriated for a specific purpose within the fiscal year and what was wrong with doing that. And then you just have a timeline that has become more and more and more convincing that there's no conclusion but that Donald Trump acted for his own personal interests and against the interests of the American public. And that's where we're at, is that he has committed an impeachable offense, although that needs to be defined, and that's what the hearings in December are for, is to define. And that's very much what happened in Watergate. The first part of the Judiciary Committee was defining what is a high crime and misdemeanor, what is an impeachable act. So that's an important starting point.
Bill, this has been the Republican defense. It's been the president's defense that they released the aid. There can't be a quid pro quo because there was no quid here. There was no pro quo part of it. There wasn't a favor that was in return for the favor. But this shows that there is a really, and we'd already known this, but there's an even more suspect timeline. We already knew that the IG report, the IG sent the whistleblower complaint to Congress 2 days before the president released the aid, and that the Intel Committee and 2 other committees started an investigation into this 2 days before the president released the aid. Now we're learning the president himself knew about this complaint in late August. What does this do to the Republican defense?
You know, the president, Katie, knew about the report in late August. He may well have participated in trying to prevent the report from getting out and getting to Congress. I think the cover-up of the whistleblower report is another thing that we're going to speak. It'll become clear in the next few days. It really is clear already that there was a real cover-up in addition to the extortion, the attempt to extort from Ukraine information, false information probably, about Joe Biden. I mean, Trump gets told about this whistleblower report. That seems a little odd. And then remember, they don't send it to the Hill, right? And remember, the Director of National Intelligence, McGuire, testifies and won't say whether he discussed this directly with the president. It's obvious when Trump talks to Sondland and he sort of reads him that kind of formal statement, there is no quid pro quo here. That's been written by some lawyer in the White House. So there is a real cover-up here. Jill mentioned Watergate. There's a real cover-up here as well as a real abuse of power.
Does any of this matter to Republicans? Does any revelation matter to Republicans?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't care about the facts and if you just decided you're going into your tribal defense of the president no matter what, of course, as you say, nothing much matters. But it is striking. I mean, since the 2 months that this story really broke, public opinion has moved more than people expected. A. B, I do think Trump has behaved more and more erratically and really reminded any Republican who has the eyes to want to see how dangerous it is, really, for him to be in office. Honestly, I think the pardon of the war criminals, the now this sort of praising of them and attacking the entire military system of justice as somehow the deep state that was out to get these people. I mean, people, I don't know. I've talked to a lot of these members. There are a few. There are more than people realize, I think, who are open, perhaps, to voting for impeachment or open in the Senate to voting for conviction. They're going to keep very quiet till the end because they just get pummeled if they stick their head up. But I'm depressed. I mean, I am, honestly, I got to say, the number of conservative journalists and sort of, writers, the number of Republicans all over the place who've just decided to throw in with Trump. It's depressing.
Let's talk about Rudy Giuliani, Neera. The president was on with Bill O'Reilly a little bit earlier today, formerly of Fox News. And people have been asking when the president was going to try to distance himself from Rudy Giuliani. He hadn't done it until suddenly today. Let's listen.
Rudy Giuliani, but he's your personal lawyer. Giuliani's your personal lawyer. So you didn't direct him to go to Ukraine to do anything or put any heat on him?
No, I didn't direct him, but he is a warrior. Rudy's a warrior. Rudy went. He possibly saw something, but you have to understand, Rudy has other people that he represents.
No, I know. He has a big firm that does that work.
He does. I think he's done work in Ukraine for years.
I guess he's implying here that Rudy could have been doing this for somebody else. But isn't it interesting and a real coincidence that the president himself mentioned these investigations in the transcript of the call with President Zelensky on July 25th. And then Rudy Giuliani just also happened to be looking into the same thing, but it wasn't directed by the president. Neera, what do you think?
I mean, I would, if I were Rudy Giuliani, I would look at Donald Trump's pattern of loyalty and all the people who've been fired by Donald Trump over the last several years and think perhaps when he's in real legal jeopardy, I mean, this whole thing is on one level hysterically funny, but to be serious about it, the Southern District of New York has a real investigation of Rudy Giuliani. They have, I mean, as far as we can tell, have already indicted 2 people, and they seem to be doing an extensive investigation. If the president of the United States, who has used the DOJ as basically his own personal legal firm, refuses to protect Rudy, I think that's a very bad sign for Rudy Giuliani. But I also think, I just want to emphasize one thing Bill said, which is we are learning facts, obviously, in real time, but we should be clear. The cover-up is something that is a new piece of information. The fact that the whistleblower's complaint was essentially hidden from Congress what seemingly is at the direction of Donald Trump, who was the subject of the whistleblower complaint, does seem to be at least additional grounds for obstruction. And I think this is several layers of complication that make getting rid of the dirt here even more important, which would make Rudy an easier target.
Jill, would you want to hear from Rudy Giuliani? Would you be making every effort to hear from him if you were working on impeachment?
I would definitely want to hear from him, but I also want to hear from all the other witnesses who have refused to come in. I think the court's decision yesterday makes it very clear that there is no such thing as absolute immunity and that witnesses have to show up. And I think with Rudy, there is so much evidence that he is key to this. I don't know how the president can say, well, he has many other clients, when in the phone calls memorandum, we see that he says, talk to Rudy. So he's telling the Ukrainians to talk to Rudy. How can he now say Rudy wasn't acting on my behalf, even though I told the Ukrainians that he was and that he was really important? So the defense becomes more and more unbelievable, more and more improbable, and no one can accept it anymore. I still hold out some hope that Republicans will start to accept the facts, much like what happened in Watergate. And I'd also point out that one of the grounds for impeachment was lying to the public. And certainly Donald Trump has outperformed Richard Nixon in that regard. And this one is certainly one of them.
Bill, I want to know what you think about the polls. Should we be looking at how the public feels about impeachment, or is this something wholly separate from public opinion? Right now, 50% say Donald Trump should be impeached and removed from office. That's the latest CNN poll. I mean, it's ticked upward in the last few months, but it seemed to level off. Should lawmakers be paying attention to this, or should they be separating it out and voting and deciding based on what they believe their constitutional duties are?
I mean, I think in this case, this is quite often lawmakers are always entitled to take their constituents' views into account. often they should give them a lot of weight if it's some economic interest or something of their constituents. This is a case, though, where they did swear an oath to the Constitution, and there's a long tradition of lawmakers in Britain and in the U.S. explaining that on matters of this kind of gravity, they've got to do the right thing, not simply the most expedient thing in terms of a possible primary challenge or whatever. So, and it's not for me an acceptable excuse, therefore, for Republicans to privately say, oh, my God, can you believe this new information about Trump? But hey, you know, I said I don't ever. My voters will be upset if I do the right thing. I really think we can't, and I do think in a certain way the media, even liberals in the media, Democrats, have been a little too accepting of that. You know, everyone wants to be a very sophisticated political analyst. None of us wants to look naive or simple-minded. So we all know, oh, come on, of course they're not going to do the right thing if their constituents, some of their constituents, their own partisan supporters don't want them to. But I do think there are times when we can expect a little bit of a higher standard from our legislators.
Bill Kristol, thank you. No, go on, Nir.
Can I
go on.
I'd just like to say, I mean, 50% of the American people believe that Donald Trump should be removed from office. Yeah. That is a very high number, given where impeachments usually are. And, you know, I think that is a stunning number. Of course, it hasn't moved a lot because 50% is a very high number. And I mean, as a strong majority of women, 60% of women think he should be removed from office. That is, I think, something no Republican should take comfort in.
I just want to explain that last graphic we put up. CNN has been asking for every president since Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump, just support for impeachment in general, even though for Bush or Obama, impeachment was not on the table. And it's always hovered around 30%, even when Clinton was going through impeachment. With Trump, it is at 50%. That is markedly more people. Neera Tanden, Nir, thank you so much. Jill Wine-Banks, thank you as well. Bill Kristol, we appreciate it.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.